Do this. All right. Good morning. Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Coffee with Artists. My name is Rachel Wilkins. Delighted to be here this morning. We are attempting to go live on Instagram right now. So if you bear with me 1 second, we're going to try and get this feed going. Let's see, are we live? Live or are we not live? All right, folks, thank you for being patient with us this morning. We're trying to get the feed going on Instagram. We have a lot of people trying to tune in on Instagram, so we're trying to get this right this morning. All right. Okay, doesn't look like that is working. So Instagram folks, come over to Facebook and watch on Facebook. All right, one of these days we're going to get this going on
Yeah,
Instagram.
I got you. It can be tricky. Going live is always hit and miss for me.
So good morning, folks. Welcome to the show. We are, we're having some issues connecting to Facebook. Hold on 1 second. Let's see. Okay, we're live on Facebook. All right. Tech issues are not, well, Facebook is not open this morning. So let me start over. Welcome to Coffee with Artists. My name is Rachel Wilkins. Delighted to be here this morning and welcome my guest, Sari Shryack. Sari is joining us from just outside of Austin, Texas this morning. And she's an Austin-based painter who got her BA in Fine Arts from Drury University. So welcome, Sari. It's great to have you here.
Oh, right, we're lagging.
We have a little.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I think so.
Okay, so can you hear me okay?
I can now.
Okay, great. So welcome. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a conversation with Luis, and he spoke highly of you, so I'm glad to connect.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, Luis actually introduced me to your work. It's always amazing to me now that I've kind of been working around the art world for 12 years that I discover somebody new and just fall in love with their artwork because I can't believe I've never encountered your work before, first of all, because I have spent time in Texas and done some shows out there. But when I looked at your page, it just the work just kind of jumped off the page to me. It's so vibrant, so colorful. So you talk about the colors being like time capsules to you. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, just for me, when I think of place or time, the normal senses that kind of are sparked are like smell and taste and texture. But as an artist, a visual artist, I'm always trying to say, how can I capture those qualities in a visual piece of art? And so for me, I mean, one thing I noticed when I moved from the Midwest to Texas is the quality of light and color down here was just different. And so I think, I've always been interested in playing with light, but capturing specifically how you can use color to tell a story and to capture that emotion and sensation of moving. So it's probably going to be like my lifelong muse. I think out of all the stages of art I've been through, color and light are like my favorite things to like chew on.
That's awesome. And, I noticed in a lot of your subject matter, you do kind of jump around for different subjects, but you have a very cohesive visual language in terms of the style and the colors that you use. But I noticed you reference a lot of 80s and 90s kind of pop culture. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's been a really fun series. I call them like my nostalgia still lifes. And I'd been doing still lifes for a little while, mostly like food-based and using that same direct sense of sunlight. But what happened was I used to anyways, regularly shop at thrift stores, and I was seeing all the things from my childhood that I wanted so bad when I was in like the 90s and 2000s. And being able to kind of collect them. And I started thinking, what if I put these into a still life with the food? And I wonder what that would look like. And it ended up being something that was just kind of out of curiosity. And then slowly it formed into, I think this is therapeutic. And so tapping into your childhood, there's something in therapy that it's called reparenting. And it's just an idea where basically, things that you may have missed during your childhood, you give back to yourself and you nurture in yourself to heal that wound. And I feel like through this series, not only on an interpersonal level, constructing the still lifes and painting them, I've been able to just kind of indulge in things that maybe I missed. Then I get the added level of like, I share this with my audience and people are like, I remember that. And so it's like this double healing kind of sensation for me. So they're fun, they're bright, they kind of check all the boxes for me. So yeah.
They do. And I mean, they're like you said, there's just so much fun and play that I see within your work. That's, it's just beautiful. And so there's so much of it, right?
Yeah.
You're still relatively young, but you have this humongous body of work. So tell me about this. I read that you have a daily practice that you do paint every day. So tell me how that came about and how you managed to balance that with being the mother of a 2-year-old.
Yeah. Well, he's actually 4.5 now, and I'm pregnant right now. I'm about to have thank you. Yeah, August 5th. This baby's due. But so for me, I graduated from college in 2014, and then we moved down to Texas, and I had a really wild, year and a half where I'd done a lot of living, but I hadn't made any art. And for me, it was like, there was this first moment where I was finally out of school, and I realized when you're not doing something, how fast time goes. Like, it blew my mind because I'd been so used to being in the school, rat wheel or whatever for so long that I realized that if you aren't doing something with that time, it'll completely get away from you. And so I, at the end of that year and a half time, I was like, I really should start like a practice or something, getting back into art. I felt really scared. I felt really anxious. So I started an anonymous art account, like separate from all things personal. And I challenged myself. I said, all right, just make one drawing, sketch, whatever, a day for a year. And I went to school for art. I was as much open to the idea. Maybe I would find out that it wasn't for me, or that it was, maybe I should find something else, move on to greener pastures. But of course, what ended up happening was I ended up loving it and loving to do art and having the free will to make whatever I wanted. And so, I've continued that daily practice. Now it's less one piece every day, and it's more just sit down every day. And sometimes it's as little as, 30 minutes, maybe once or twice a day, to, if I'm really lucky around commission season, I can get like 5 or 6 hours in a day, which is pretty nice. But yeah, I think for me, consistency was just what I needed to get me out of the rut. And it's just become like a really good tool for me.
That's amazing. And how would you say your work has evolved since you first started that practice?
I mean, I've gotten better. I've just, my skill, that's the thing with art, is I think sometimes you are like, oh, it's talent, or, oh, it's this, but I leave up all of my, my work, and there's weird paintings in there and hits and misses, but, I think it's a skill like anything else. And the more you put into it, not only the more fun does it, it gets more fun for you and more enriching, but you do technically get better, especially if that's your goal, And so for me, I saw a style emerge where in the beginning it was kind of, I was playing with different styles, and then all of a sudden my own voice came out of it. And I just sort of honed my craft. I mean, I think it's, it's about put time in and you'll get better.
Would you say that you looked towards anybody else, or you took any classes, or did you just really kind of mine into what you were creating yourself to develop?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just daily practice and trying to get better. I had a really good painting professor who taught us how to kind of teach ourselves. So how to, study other artists or other references, and how to go about, checking for accuracy and applying that, and, doing painting studies and having that be about like learning the other artist's technique. And so he had already given me the tools from college, where I feel like I could have ran with that. But then on the other hand, I also had, there's so many good artists on Instagram. Like I was blown away when I first signed up, because, in 2014, it was kind of, the Instagram was still like a little bit informal, and people didn't really run businesses out of it. And so when I started my account January 1, 2016, I looked, and there was these artists selling stuff, for pretty high, they were making an income, and they were making beautiful artwork that's like gallery level artwork on Instagram. So I was super inspired by my peers on Instagram, and I've taken a couple workshops too, so to even it all out. But yeah.
I think social media is just, like you said, it was not a place that you thought you would do business or, exchange funds, but it's really become an incredible resource for artists, especially Instagram. So looking at your Instagram page, you said you've been doing this for 4 years. You have almost 200,000 followers.
Yeah.
Are they all organic followers, or is that something that, just from ads, or is it just something that grew naturally?
Yeah, no, it's learning techniques and stuff like that. Probably the other half of being an artist that I enjoy playing around with is, it's not like the admin or the finances. I really like the marketing half of it. I think that, I love, curling up with a good article and seeing what the updates on Instagram are going to look like and how that's going to affect organic growth and stuff. So I'm a little bit of a geek in that sense. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, it really took off. For about 2 years, so 2016, 2017, I remember I couldn't quite crack 2,000 followers, which I know isn't nothing, but I mean, I was posting one full big acrylic painting every single day. So I was putting in a lot of work. And then I took there was a local art residency program for emerging artists. It's called Spray ATX Ignite. If anyone's interested, they still do great work.
We worked with them in
did you?
Austin. Yeah, we gave away a residency.
That's amazing. Yeah, they're so great. I wish, I always feel bad talking about it because it's niche to Austin, but it was so fabulous. They taught me like legal stuff and how to talk about your artwork in a professional setting. But one of the people they had me sit down and talk with was someone who knew a lot about social media. And so she taught me about, what it looked like to do giveaways and really curating the time of day you posted. Because when I started Instagram, it was all chronological. 2016, it went a lot of changes and updates. But yeah, she kind of gave me some tools to use, and I think I maximized those. Plus, I feel like I was a little bit due of a market correction. I know that sounds like haughty to say, but like I've been putting out one full piece of artwork every single day, and all of a sudden, I think like lightning struck right at the right time. And in that year, I went from 2K to like, I think at the end of the year, I was close to like 50K or something. So it was an explosion. Yeah. And so I've kind of rode that momentum. And then also Instagram really likes daily content. Like I always feel bad recommending that because it's just not feasible for a lot of artists. I paint acrylic, I paint quick, and that I'm tailored to that. But yeah, the algorithm loves daily content and when you participate in stories. And so I think a lot of it is just momentum, daily content, and yeah, I don't know, snowballed.
And I noticed that you do engage a lot with your audience. Like, a lot of your posts have been quite deeply personal about some of your hardships and your experiences. And I know that a lot of people engage back with you. And I think that's a big part of the growth process, certainly on social media.
Yeah, that's something I've worked towards, especially recently, is, being a little more personal. But I've always liked, engaging and giving back. I feel like I was so lucky to get to even go to college or to be an artist that I have a really deep desire to like give what I know. I feel like in the art world, there's a lot of like secrecy and people are coy with their prices. And it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And I've never quite jived with that. I've always just been like, it's a way to make income. And if you love it and like you want to do it, like just go for it. Like, here's what I do. I'm by no means a guru at anything, but I always like to share what I know. And if it can help someone, then like that feels really good to me. So I think engaging in that kind of interaction with your audience is also helpful because you're giving them something. So,
and it's impactful. It's funny that you said smoke and mirrors. That's exactly how I've described the art world over the years. And I said, one day I want to open a gallery and I want to call it Smoke and Mirrors.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so cute. I love that. Get right to the point.
Because it is. And even on a very innocent level, like when you think about like what a show looks like, when you go to an art show, it's beautiful. Everything's lit really well. But like the underbelly to an art show is gritty and dirty and it's crawling under places and
totally
up. And, so I think, even kind of the innocent level of, what you see versus what actually it takes to put something together is certainly an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, totally.
So you I read something that said you encourage a recalibration of the intrinsic value of place. So you have this idea that through color you're able to, reorder something that is natural. Just one of the
Yeah.
photographs that I shared of your work yesterday was, like almost like a greenhouse with, cacti and all these different lush, greenery, but it's in these
Yeah.
vibrant pinks and purples and yellows. Tell us a little bit about that thought process.
Yeah, I think I've always, enjoyed diving into color. I don't know that it was always like the forefront of my mind, but when I started painting, even in college, the thing that stood out, before I ever got a hold of accuracy or composition was I just loved diving into color, but I still wanted to hang on to representational art. And so for me, it's kind of always been this playing back and forth with, how do I have that like kind of effervescent, placeless, timeless quality that just playing with sheer color can offer you, but hang it like on something that's realistic. And so for me, like the greenhouses are really cool because they offered enough structure, I mean, literally in some sense, that I was able to hang these colors and play like the thing about that painting that you shared specifically is it's quite large. It's I don't know what it is in centimeters, but it's 30 by 40. So I think like, what would that be? A few feet by a few feet. I'm so bad at converting, sorry.
Don't worry about it.
But it's pretty large. And up close, it almost looks like mini abstract paintings because the colors are quite unnatural to, the greens, there's a lot of phthalo and real plants. There's almost never a phthalo quality to it. It's all, much more muted. And then they have like, bright yellows thrown in and redraw lines. And so it really is pretty divorced from the actual what you're looking at in a greenhouse because it really is pretty monochrome. But for me, it's just playing with and pulling out the colors and seeing if you can have that lighter kind of misplaced abstract quality to this realistic. Like I just love it almost feels like a head game. Like how can I make this abstract without completely tearing it from reality? And I feel like there's kind of that sense in real life. I always kind of compare it to, when you are like driving or walking and you see like a super moon in the sky and it's so big, and you pull out your phone and you take a picture of it and then you look at the photo and it's like, it's not even the same. It feels so different. And so for me, when I'm painting these things, I feel like I'm wanting to connect more to how it feels when you walk into a greenhouse, that like the way you can smell it and you can feel the humidity. And so through color, I feel like that's my best chance of holding on to that. I'm not literally painting the humidity, but I'm infusing these blues and turquoise and purples that aren't actually there in a way that isn't just like garish, but not conventional. I don't know. I feel like I'm getting long-winded, but it's kind of that dialogue that I'm playing with.
It's beautiful, and you really do impact all of the senses. Now that you're explaining it, I could see that, that kind of intersectionality of all those different senses working at once. It's amazing.
Totally.
I was thinking, as you were saying about photographing the moon, I live very close to the New York skyline. And I remember there was like that, I think it was the harvest moon. It was like this big, I mean, it was ginormous, this orange moon and this, the backdrop of New York City. And I'm like, this is amazing. I'm like racing to try and get a photograph of it. And you take the photograph and it looks like,
beautiful.
I'm like, yep, there's some things you just cannot, even with the technological capabilities that we have today, something can't be captured the way that an artist can capture them. So
yeah, that's why we need artists, because there is such a disconnect between documentation and lived experience. So we need so many more of them,
So who are your kind of big influences creatively?
Yeah, gosh, so many. That's the thing with being exposed to Instagram. I always think of that question, and I think it was a lot cleaner to answer maybe 30, 40 years ago, because you had a handful of like mentors and old, historical favorites. But now with Instagram, like I always tell people, just go look at my following list for the long list of it. But, I guess more specifically, it kind of changes, especially with the artists that I follow on Instagram. Right now I'm really kind of starting to dig into portraiture. And so like Felicia Forte is someone, I actually took a workshop with her and that was amazing. Her stuff is phenomenal. I always remember them by their handles, but like some of the old greats are, you know, my first love was Edward Hopper. And then, of course, Wayne Thiebaud, I get compared to him a lot. I think the way we see light is pretty similar. But yeah, it's almost too many I'm always going through kicks where I'm just like, I'm so floored by the talent and all the artists out there.
You know, one of the things that I loved looking through your work was that you have focused on a lot of the, I guess, some of the things that are favorable now on television and, you know, this reality TV and memes and all these kind of funny, not necessarily highbrow art subjects, but you know, incorporate your own style into them, and they're really beautiful works of art. How impacted are you by the social culture of today and the millennial kind of culture?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally impacted by it. I love that series because I think it's a good reminder to not take yourself too seriously. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of like, you know, as an artist, your work is deeply meaningful, regardless of what you paint. You know, just the fact that you're making art is, you know, borderline sacred. It's amazing. But I think sometimes in the art world, people are so quick to draw lines of like real art, not real art, design art, fine art, conceptual art, whatever. That for me, it's, you know, it's a way to sort of just be like, you know, it's, I don't know, not to get too far into it, but, you know, my screen and my computer time is part of my landscape.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you think of landscape painters. Well, these are people, you know, I mean, they're spending a lot of time in nature and doing plein air painting. But for me, you know, when you get your weekly screen report, I mean, I have an embarrassingly high amount of time I spend on my phone. And so if you think about it, like if that was a place that you went, like if all that time was spent in a physical place, like wouldn't that inspire you as an artist? Like, wouldn't that come through your work? And so, you know, whether it's good or bad, or, you know, I haven't figured out, but, you know, these memes and these snippets of TV and part of my vernacular as my husband and I speak to each other and my friends. And so it feels like part of my life. And at some point I just sort of felt like, why am I ignoring this part of my life so that I remain like a legit artist? Like it just kind of felt disingenuous. And so incorporating it into my art, not only is it a way to make myself laugh, which I know that seems selfish, but like most of my art is for me. But then it connects with people. And I think I'm a little bit poking fun of the fact that like I'm an artist who found her footing on an app. I think it's all just so silly. And so I love making light of it and I don't know, making fun of myself, I guess.
I think that's brilliant because, something you don't necessarily think of that. Yes. First of all, I don't even look at the number of hours I spend on my device because I've done it like once or twice. And I'm like, oh God, I need to go to therapy. This is really bad. But, it is a place that we visit for a purpose, right? Like for business or for research. Like it sounds like a lot of what you're doing could be considered research, right? Just because you're not going to a library and kind of shifting through historical textbooks, you're finding sources and sources of inspiration and meaning by being online. And I think it's great that you're not being constrained, like you're not constrained by these traditional norms of you must paint regular portraits or landscapes or traditional abstracts. You because you are living in that world, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. It's just honest, I feel like.
Very honest. How would you say that the kind of following that you have and the the support that you have online, would you say that translates to real world success, or is it something tangible?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly it's as an artist, it's encouraging. It feels good to have people say I resonate or I get that or I understand that. I think that's at the core of what maybe I'm projecting, but like a lot of art is it's just that desire to connect with people. And so I think, I don't know, sometimes I understand the difference between and the value specifically in having your art in physical spaces and doing the physical art thing, because I understand that a painting speaks so much more differently in person. I make myself go to as many art things as I can. And there is a humongous disconnect between, seeing a little painting this big and liking it and then seeing it in person. And I've had the experience of both liking someone on Instagram and I see their art in person, and then I am like in love and I'm a hardcore fan. And I've also had the experience kind of to the counter, and maybe their work just speaks better on a 2-dimensional form. And that's fine. That's illustration. There's purpose in that. Like it's fine. It's totally cool. But yeah, I also think that there's something so pure about being able to just show your art. Like, isn't that like kind of the essence of what we wanted to do as little kids? Like, I just remember so much of my childhood was spending, half a day drawing, coloring, making something. And then that excited feeling of like, I'm gonna go show it to my mom. Like, I'm just gonna run downstairs. And like, I feel like to some extent, Instagram kind of taps back into that of like, I can spend all morning in my studio making something, and it's so joyful and it's so fun. And then I get almost like excited, like shaky, like occasionally with posting something where I'm like, I can't wait till they see this. And it's like, it's almost like getting to show it to my friends. So it's, I struggle with the fact that like there is so much value to seeing it in person, but I love the format. I can't imagine like had Instagram existed in other time periods, like which artists would have gravitated towards that, like bypass all the, bureaucracy and galleries, maybe you're far away from a metro, and then you just get to share your work with people. So I try not to be cynical about it. I think some people can be a little skeptical of Instagram, and like I totally respect that line of thinking, but for me anyways, I really enjoy being able to just like share my work at the core, and connecting with my my followers and other artists. And yeah.
I mean, I think it's an incredible platform, and I think that the idea that we can reach and impact so many people from really minimal effort in terms of what we have to do to get the work out is amazing. And it's but I do think there's an element of it being a blessing and a curse, particularly for younger folks, because I think a lot of people have their self-worth wrapped up in the feedback that they get on social, and that's something that concerns me as to where we're heading, because so many people they're concerned with how many likes they get, and they'll feel a certain way if they don't get a certain amount of interaction with a piece, when really it can, especially for artists, right? Because what we put out is very personal. We're very vulnerable when we do put it out to the world, and for somebody who may be not seeing a lot of positive feedback, that could have nothing to do with the work. It could be the fact that they're not using hashtags. It could be the fact that they're not, favored by the algorithm.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Have you seen anything like that? Or have you had any personal experience where perhaps you felt a little like your self-worth is kind of wrapped up in that at any point?
Sure. I mean, I think it's impossible to not. I mean, I think it's all about boundary work at that point. You can't, I mean, the algorithm is just it's a tool made by a company to mine your attention span. So I was just talking good about it. Now I'm throwing it under the bus, but but it's not real life. It's I don't know. I guess the thing I can think about is like I would do these throwbacks where I'll post something that I made like in 2016 and 17, and like I said, those were the 2 years that like I was grinding, but like I had but minimal traction on Instagram. And I'll post it now, and it's something that got like 20 likes, 3-4 years ago. And all of a sudden it'll go viral and end up on the explore page. And it's, I need to make a dedicated post about it, because it's not like, I hope people know that it's not a direct, especially when you're starting out, it's not a direct reflection of who you are at all. The Instagram is all about bright colors, splashy, quick consistency. So it's kind of tailor-made for, artists kind of in my vein. But let's say you're a graphite artist and you're working at an interesting scale, and, you put out one large piece every, 2 weeks. I mean, there's nothing you can do. I hope people, especially in that boat, are not tying their self-worth to that, because it factually doesn't make sense. Like the algorithm isn't made for that. And that's, I guess, where the shortfall is. But yeah, I mean, I hope people know that that's not how Instagram works. I mean, yeah. And then what do you do there? I guess you can use Instagram almost as more of a tool to find community, and not, and find artists who can give you direct feedback or like connections to where you can get your art out, especially if you know that your art does better outside of this little tiny screen. Yeah, that's so hard. Yeah.
I wonder as well how many folks, and in fact, let me ask you the question, has the feedback that you've received online ever informed your creative direction? Like, for example, if there's a piece that gets, really blows up and goes kind of viral, does that then say to you, oh, I need to make more work like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to not kind of pull into that. But, one thing I've been pretty adamant about since the beginning is putting up boundaries. So having distinct boundaries for my bodies of work. So in my mind, I divide my work up primarily into two halves. I have my little wood panel studies. And so those are mostly, on 4x4 inch all the way up to like, this size, a little bit larger. Wood panels, and those are more of a daily, almost like a public sketchbook or a public journal. So they're a little less formal. Sometimes they're a little more tongue in cheek, and they're kind of meant to, for me, flush out ideas. Like anytime I've started a new series, I've worked it out on smaller scale, little wood panels. And then if I feel like there's something there, then I move it over to my other body of work, which is they're usually much larger. I take a lot more time working on them. And then they're usually grouped into series that have like an artist statement with it, and I treat it completely differently. And so the work that that feels more like sacred and meaningful to me, I could care less if I sold it. I could care less if it does well on Instagram. That work is just for Sari. That's my work. That's, I have like my old college painting professor and a handful of other artists that I really trust, and they get input, but otherwise like that's all me. And then like I said, my smaller body of work, I play with the algorithm a little bit, and I think it's interesting to see what's out there. And that's actually mostly my moneymaker. So that has a little bit of sway with the algorithm, but I mean, there's only so many times you can paint sliced oranges. They do really well in the algorithm, but like, at the end of the day, I'm pretty selfish. I paint what I like and what I want. It doesn't affect me. I think it would be naive for me to be like, no, it doesn't affect me, but it is something I really work towards. I have, one body of work that's super off limits from everyone, and then another one that's a little more permeable. But I try not to. I mean, that's definitely intentional about it, but it's hard.
I've noticed that when you do share, and we're going to get off Instagram in a moment, I promise. But it is such a it's such a huge part of your art business.
Totally.
But I notice you often share, pretty significant stories with each post. Like you don't just post and kind of, with a bunch of hashtags. Like there's meaning and there's story there. Were you always a natural storyteller, or is this something that you kind of learned to do over time?
Yeah, I've always wanted to write, and to I think that's my other biggest passion. Any of my like friends in real life are always like, they know I'm like always mid post or mid writing about something. Yeah, it's definitely a goal and an intention for me. It wasn't passive, but truly I was just super intimidated by it, especially in the beginning. I'm pretty like, when in school I had dyslexia, and like writing has always been a bit of a struggle for me. I remember I took honors most of my classes, but I had remedial writing. Like it just took so long for it to click for me. I don't know what it is. But I remember about like maybe halfway through my first year realizing like, so the whole mindset of like doing one painting a day was like, I wanted to get better. And then I sort of had this like little micro aha moment where I was like, well, maybe I'll get better at writing if I do that every day. I mean, they're small and they've gotten longer through the years, but it's been something I've wanted to share more about. And I also had, a pretty unconventional upbringing. And so it's a drive for me to kind of honor that story. And I think there's a lot within, what I went through that I can share with other people. And so I think between loving reading and writing and then having a story I want to tell, I think I'm getting closer to like where I want to be with my writing, and especially with my art together. So yes, it is definitely intentional, but I started out very intimidated by it.
That's amazing. So you touched a little bit on this, unconventional upbringing. You mentioned that your work centers around two topics: uncertainty and hope. So tell us about, if you're comfortable, tell us a little bit about growing up, how that informed your career.
Right. Yeah. So I grew up in Springfield, Missouri, in the Ozarks, and we grew up very poor. And so a big theme for me has been, I feel like I'm getting there now. I feel like I'm starting to finally resonate, but like I didn't feel like I belonged in the art world. I felt like it wasn't for me. Like I never gone to an art museum until I was in college. I can remember growing up and my mom being like, why would you buy something that was, $1,000 when you could make something, out of stuff from the thrift store? Like we weren't art people. We kind of made fun of that and we just didn't understand. And, anyways, and so my approach to art was always that, like, I loved making art, but I felt so outside the art world. A lot of that has to do with, like I said, the growing up very low income. And I mentioned earlier that, I didn't think college was for me. My parents pushed really hard that I try to get a really good education. But part of that was we had no money. I just, it was, sorry, I'm not very articulate with this, but it was just, I just didn't think that, for me, so I was a runner in high school, and I thought that my best shot at getting into college was to get a running scholarship. And so I was able to get one and go to a college in my hometown. And it was a very precarious path to get there. But yeah, basically so many of my peers, weren't able to get to college and didn't get to do something like to be a professional artist, that I have this like disconnect. Yeah, I don't know if I'm making sense of that. I got to work on writing that out, right?
Well, it's a deeply personal experience.
Yeah.
What were some of the kind of parallels between running and creating?
Yeah, no, it's funny because that's actually kind of the genesis of like, that was a lot of the thinking behind the whole one painting a day thing. Since I was 15, I had run, once a day, every day. And what I loved about that mindset was that it wasn't about being, it wasn't about like having a PR every time you ran. Like that's just not how running works. It's just about getting in miles. And there's a lot of running language around, 1 mile at a time. And it doesn't matter if it's the slowest mile ever. The fact is you want to get in, mileage. And so for me, mindset translated pretty well into what if I approached art like that? Like, what if I didn't worry about like making a masterpiece every time I, made something. And instead I said, okay, even if this turns out wonky or not to my standard, I'm just going to put it in every day and see what that does. So for me, it was a lot of the same, like, it's both a release and letting go of like this desire to be perfect paired with consistency. And I found that was kind of a magic spot for me, both with running and with art.
Yeah. So, you talked about being a child and, coloring and being really excited to go show your mom these images that you created. Was it something that was supported? Were you encouraged to be creative when you were a young person?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I was. It's funny. I was listening to your interview with Luis the other day, and he was talking about his relationship with his grandma and stuff like that, and people, going to camps. I didn't take a lot of, I went to a low, pretty underfunded school. And I remember as I was going to school, like art programs were cut, but I feel like I got the most practice doing art. It was actually at home. I spent a lot of my childhood grounded. My parents are very strict. And so the only thing I was able to do when I was grounded was to read and to do art. And I remember at the time being so like upset by this, but it ended up being, I think, a blessing in disguise. So yeah, I painted and drew and illustrated and collaged and sculpted like my whole childhood. And, my parents were always passively okay with it, but they were pretty adamant that I get like a job that could make money. Their whole thing was like, don't be like us, like do better, make something of yourself. And, I have boundaries with them now. So like, it's, I'm pretty free to do whatever I want, but yeah, I mean, I think they wanted me to be creative, but they wanted me to have a job that had income. So it's, most artists can probably relate to that.
100%. So you talked about, or you have this moniker of, not sorry or sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
Art. You talk about being unapologetically colorful. Tell us how the name came about, why you decided to, run a separate account as kind of like an alias.
Yeah. Well, the reason I started a separate account was truthfully just because I was embarrassed. I had gone to, college for for art, I had, 3 years of painting experience and 4 years of art experience. And so I'd made some pretty good paintings in college I was proud of, but I think we forget that like when you're in a school setting, you are kind of like in a little incubator. Like you just have a lot of time to like talk with the professor and talk with your peers and really hone your craft. And so of course you come out of college with some really good work. And in that year and a half that I didn't make really anything, I did piddle a little, but I remember the like handful of paintings I started and never completed. I was shocked at how, to me, how bad they were. I was just like, wow, did I lose everything? Like, I don't understand this disconnect. And so, I I started the account because I wanted a place that was separate where I could make, where no one knew I went to college. I didn't have to talk about it. And I could just be like, I'm making one thing a day. And there's a lot of community around one painting a day, like hashtags and stuff on Instagram. So I had a, small group of us would kind of cheer each other on. And so for me, again, the thesis was just that, like, I was like, all right, I'm going to make something separate and not tell anyone I'm doing this. But, as far as like naming it, since, my name is spelled Sari. And so it reads Sari, like that makes sense. But it's pronounced Sari. So since forever I've been saying it's Sari, not sorry. And then the teacher or whoever is like, oh, sorry, Sari. And it's a whole thing. So I cashed in on that. I think like there was a song that came out around that time. It was like, sorry, not sorry. And it was a whole thing. So I just used that as the hashtag and kind of ran with it. But it's been good. I remember at the time I thought it was like really like abrasive and kind of scary. I'm naturally a lot more timid. And so I've almost feel like I've grown into the name, which I'm really glad for. But yeah, it was kind of just a harebrained idea.
Do you ever feel like you're stepping into character when you kind of go into that world?
Yeah, I think sometimes, especially when I post something especially vulnerable or really personal, I think that helps to just be like, I am, more confident than I am, or that I'm, more secure than I am. And, certainly I'm always everything, all the blurry pieces of that, being an artist that I'm a little more intimidated by. And so being not sorry art, I feel like helps me fill in the gaps. I can present my work, but then I can also be an artist. And I think I'm learning more and more the older I get that like the whole artist is like the package of your art. You can't just anonymously post your art. I mean, you can do anything, but it certainly helps. Yeah.
And I think you tapped into something, you are the artwork. Like you even look like your artwork. You have these vibrant colors. But there's this idea that and I think it gets lost a lot today. But the artist persona, right? We think of artists from history, and they're like these mysterious characters. Like when I teach art business, I often say it's not for everybody, but there is this concept of people want that element of mystery. They want somebody who looks and comes across as an artist, that if they walked in the room, they would know that is the artist. And I think that we forget that today. You can think of like Frida or Andy Warhol. They've got these very distinct looks about them that almost emulate the work that they create. So I think you definitely tapped into that. So you mentioned community being a big thing for you online. How important is community offline for you, and do you have that support?
Yes, very important. I found when I was a couple years in that I was deeply imbalanced. I had these wonderful Instagram friends, like even, in private messages and text, and like we'd really contact each other. But you can't talk about art and not have it be in person. Like it just, like as much as I love Instagram, it's so different. I know we just talked about this, like it really is. And so, it was sort of something I was pretty intentional about a couple years in. I was like, I need to find art friends. And actually one of my best friends, I reached out to her on her stories. She had 2 little boys that were around the same age as my little boy. And so we just met up, and, we talk all the time. We, live near each other. And so we'll look at each other's artwork, and I have art hanging in her house and vice versa. And then I have, Austin has a pretty robust art community. There's, ATX Gals is a great female-led art collective. They do art shows as kind of their primary thing, but a secondary part of their whole program is that Like I have this group of amazing females who have seen my work in person, who I can bounce ideas off of. And going back to what we said earlier, you have to be really careful with whose ideas and opinions you let in. And these are a group of women who I look up to their work. The respect is mutual. We're both kind of vibing on the same thing. What's even greater is like when I'm capturing these spots in Austin, like they know what they look like and they can be like, oh, that fits that. And so yes, basically it's incredibly important. And in fact, when I get asked, advice for new artists, aside from, making, being true to yourself and making artwork for yourself, the next biggest thing is to try as hard as you can to have those in-person connections. And I know that that's a luxury, and, a lot of people don't live close to art communities, but man, it's incredibly helpful to have people you can bounce ideas off of, and people who can lovingly tell you maybe when, you need to work through an idea. And so, yeah, in-person relationships are vital, having a communication with a gallery, and yeah, it's really important.
100%. What do you hope that the viewer takes away from your work?
Yeah, I hope that they, I hope that I don't know, that I guess, piece by piece, I hope it kind of lifts their mood and makes them interested in things, and maybe looking at how we can infuse abstraction and color and, a larger than life sense of the world to things that are mundane. I think, the more we can, especially during this quarantine times, a lot of us are limited to just our little neighborhood or our block, or even maybe just our house. I think we can look inward, and, as artists, like our superpower is that we can shine light, whatever that looks like, on those objects and, infuse something into them. And I hope that people are, artists are inspired to do that within their own lives, and that people who maybe aren't artists are willing to look at things in their own life and know that everything has the potential to be art. I think in a broader sense, what, I want people to take away when they look at my art and my story and who I am as a whole, I hope that it inspires them, to either make art or appreciate art. And it doesn't have to be stuffy and old, and it doesn't have to be entry. It is for you. If you have a story to tell, if you want to make something, art is for you. This art world isn't exclusive, and it isn't smoke and mirrors, and it shouldn't be. Like, I just want it to be open. Like, and the thing I say all the time, and I mean it, is like, if you don't see what yourself and what you want to make in the art world, don't take it as a sign to not pursue art. Take it as your invitation. Like, because the stuff you see and you make isn't in the art world, that means you should go after it. And so that's the big takeaway I want to say, is just a call to action. Like, do it, make the art, make your art, get it out there.
I think that is profound and poetically said. So bravo. What is, kind of on that theme, what is the most rewarding part of being an artist for you?
Yeah. I think it's two things. I think one is just, it's, personally, it just feels good to like make art and show it. I think having people connect and be like, I see you, I see that, just feels good. I think that's like a big part of my fuel. And then the other half is like people, when they said, I'm inspired to make art because of you, or I'm inspired, I picked up the paintbrush again because of you. Like, that is like music to my ears. I want that so much. I think we need more people making art in the world. And, I know it feels like such a futile time to make art, and like everyone's like, how can I help? But I think sometimes making art is the most nourishing thing you can do, not only for yourself, but for like the world around you. So yeah.
Amazing. So folks, we are going to take some questions for Sari. So if you have anything that you would like to ask or any feedback, do jump into the comments. And I know we talked a little bit about this before we jumped on, but, how are you navigating this new normal? How are you, how's it impacting you creatively? How's it impacting your business and your plans that you perhaps had for this year?
Yeah, it's tough because on paper, like I feel like I'm very fortunate and privileged that I am largely unaffected, in the sense that like my actual daily routine is almost untouched, in the sense that like I am an artist. I spend a lot of time at home in my studio making, and then I, spend a lot of time with my kid, and then I spend a lot of time posting and doing marketing. So, and my husband's job is similar, and my child's young enough that like he's been at home the whole time. So like on paper, it's all very good. I think, as an artist, it's hard not to be sensitive to the, greater struggles of the world. And it's so I'm balancing that. And then, I think to say that it isn't, still traumatic as a cultural human experience, I still feel like I listened to a really good conversation, a podcast the other day, and it was talking about how all of us are kind of operating a little lower on Maslow's hierarchy. We're all, instead of like self-actualizing, I think we're all kind of coping with trauma. So I feel like there's this sort of like, even though I'm like, oh, I'm fine, like everything's fine, I feel this deeper kind of, I don't know, just same thing everyone's feeling, that, every fourth day you sort of have your solid cry, and you take a couple days off from the news. So I'm definitely not immune from that, but perspective wise, I'm very lucky. Of course, sales are affected. My middle has hollowed out, which just means like I occasionally still get my large sales, and I'm doing pretty good on prints, but it's just the business side of things are a little bit wild. But yeah, I'm trying to do these Instagram lives where I'm teaching and giving back, and that's kind of been the best way for me to take this sort of heavy, anxious, traumatic kind of energy and putting it into something. And that's been really helpful. But yeah, I don't know. I'm okay, but I'm dealing with it.
I totally relate. It's funny that you said like every fourth day that you feel that.
Yeah.
I said to my wife, I said, some days I just feel like I'm standing on the edge of the cliff, and if somebody went like this, I would like go over. But I don't, right? And we're fine. And I think staying with gratitude, and my family are healthy, and staying grateful for those that are on the front lines, and turning up the news is a big one for me, because it's just so much negativity all of the time. I mean, I try to stay up to date.
Yeah.
It's hard to consume that much negativity on a daily basis. Like you, for me, business completely stopped because we primarily do art events.
Yeah.
But doing these interviews each day is just, giving me a reason to get up and get showered.
Yeah. And thank you for doing that. I think, it's important to not, be bogged down by how little you feel, especially as an artist. Like, you deal in aesthetics, and it's easy to be like, I'm not doing anything, I'm not helping. But working when you're putting it in, and I think you're more people I mean, it's a mindset change, if nothing else.
Absolutely. All right. So we have a couple questions here. So Leo says, hi, Leo. Are you getting more attention online, and how do you find someone to work with on marketing? I don't think you need anyone to work with on marketing.
Yeah, I need help in lots of other areas, but marketing I've got. Yeah, how are you getting more attention? So like specific strategies. Yeah, I mean, I could rattle off for days different strategies, because basically that's all that Instagram marketing and online marketing is a bunch of like micro strategies, in addition to just putting out lots of content, whatever that looks like. But I guess like if I could just give you a tip, it would be in regards to hashtags. I was just talking to someone about this, but when you're setting up your hashtag, you get 30 of them. And what I like to do is categorize it into 3 groups. And so your large group is going to be your large hashtags. So think artists on Instagram, like the huge ones, the ones that have like billions of tags or whatever. Mm-hmm. Your second tier are the ones that are maybe a little more niche. So like, contemporary Impressionism or lowbrow art for me, like things that are a little more in the niche category. And then your last 10, those are the ones that you're going to kind of be milling through quickly. And it's like art challenges, maybe your name specifically, just different micro groups. So like someone you follow, if they have like a daily prompt, or maybe someone you follow and you adhere to, if they have like a hashtag that isn't just their name, like, do more or something like that. Having those last 10 be something that are a little more niche. And if you kind of keep checking into those, that really helps. That way you're not just like oversaturating on the big ones and getting lost, but you're not just doing the niche ones. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. So I don't know. That's just a little bite-sized tip.
Great advice. And also, on the micro niche, I think geographical tags are also really good, like Austin artists and things like
East
that.
Austin. Yeah, I get really specific. Totally.
That's awesome. All right. So Jan, hey Jan, good morning. What are the podcasts you're listening to, and what is your playlist for creative inspiration? Great question.
Yeah. Gosh, there's so many good art podcasts out there. One of my friends from Austin, her name is Becca Borelli. She has a podcast that I think she's about 10 episodes into, and it's really good. It's called The Secret Sauce. I think it's on every platform. But she's really interested in what it is to be a sensitive person and how artists are often highly sensitive people. So she references that. If you've read the book, Highly Sensitive Person, I think it's what it's called. She talks a lot about that, and how that might manifest in your art and how you can use it as a superpower. And it's such a good podcast because it not only kind of talks about the deeper, more nourishing parts of being an artist, but she also gives you bite-sized strategies on how to use, being sensitive or being an artist to have an income. So it's a fabulous podcast. I recommend her. And then Art and Cocktails, my friend Katerina Popova, she does Create Magazine, but that's a really good one. She has a lot of amazing interviews. But yeah, those are probably my two favorite right now. And then playlists. Yeah, I love to change it up. If I'm doing like a 2000s still life, like I will totally whip out the Britney Spears and like get into it. I think it just feels good. I have like my indie playlists, and yeah, I change it up a lot. I'm very sporadic.
Do you think the music that you're listening to at the time influences the work?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I don't know if there's science to that, but it feels good. I know that like the more excited and, or maybe not excited, happy, but just the more energetic I feel about a piece, I feel like the process is easier, and I would hope that shows up in my work. But I'm not scientific about it, but it feels good.
That's awesome. And two podcasts I would like to recommend because I really am enjoying them right now is Design Matters by Debbie Millman. Really phenomenal conversations. Her conversation recently with Marilyn Minter was just amazing. I love Marilyn's work. She's probably my all-time favorite. And Under the Skin by Russell Brand was just some phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
So for anybody out there who's looking for some new content to get into, they're definitely my favorites right now.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm ready to write this down right now.
And of course, we have a podcast as well, but that's I'm not here for a shameless plug, but you can look it up. It's Squad Art Business. All right. So, what are your aspirations? Before we close this out, what do you hope for the future? What's next for you?
Yeah, to creating art and balancing that with motherhood. I think it's always kind of its own creative outlet in and of itself. Is like, how do you balance the two? But yeah, I hope I can continue to, cultivate my story a little better. I'm just starting to talk about it, and I would love to intertwine that in my art in a meaningful way. And all along the way, helping people. I think even just telling your story, like full stop, can help people. But to further that, I would just like to continue on that campaign I have of like, that you are, the art world needs you. The art world wants your voice. if I can drill that and get people to feel inspired who maybe otherwise wouldn't, that would make me feel good. So that's like my bigger mission statement. So.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us this morning. This was a joy to speak to you and to learn about your process and your work. And thank you for being so candid and open about your story as well. So if we can just let folks know where they can learn more about you. You just need your website.
Yeah, sure. My website is sari.studio. So it's just SARI.studio. And then Instagram is the quickest, easiest, fastest way to find me. I do lots of Q&As, so you can ask questions, and obviously DMs I try to get back to. I'm not perfect, but I do spend a lot of time on that every day. So that's the two best ways. I am on Facebook and Pinterest and all that, but yeah, Instagram is my home base.
Yes, folks, and go check it out. You will not be disappointed. Get yourself some color this beautiful Tuesday morning and check out Sari's work. It is wonderful. All right, folks, we will be back tomorrow, Wednesday morning, 11 a.m., same time, and we will see you then. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks again, Sari.
Thank you.